folks, Ariel over here, not at Fineth, with a little look at haymaking here in the mountains of Wyoming. This is not our property. This is part of what Clay does every year as one of his jobs, and I've been helping him for quite a few years now. Anyway, all total, this is about 160 acres of hay, mostly, as you'll be able to tell here shortly, split up into lots of small pastures, small little hay meadows tucked in between trees and gullies and hills and so on. And this is all dryland grass hay, so it's not irrigated in any way, and it is the mixture of native grasses that we're growing. This is not a cultivated field. It's never plowed up and seeded or anything like that. It's cultivated as in and taken care of, but not, the soil is not turned up. Anyhow, so this is what we've been busy with for the last little while. Well, you haven't seen much from me because you gotta make hay as the sun when the sun shines, and it's been good haymaking weather, blazing hot and sunny and dry with a little breeze, which is just perfect for drying hay. It's also weather I happen to hate otherwise because it's way too warm for me. But anyway, so about 160 acres of hay, and this is the first and only cutting for the year. And I know in many areas you get 2 or 3 or 6 or whatever cuttings of hay in a year, but not here. The grass grows once in the year, and then that's it until next year. This year is a pretty average crop. The last couple have been really, really low, and occasionally we'll have one that's really, really good. But this is about average. So that's Clay driving the swather. It's got a big sickle bar, looks kind of like 2 serrated steak knives in the front. You can't even see them while they're running because they're under the grass. And they're slicing off all those blades and spitting it out in that windrow in the back. And then comes the part that I help with. Braley and I hop in the tractor, the other older tractor, and we run the hay rake. Here's a little time lapse of just one of the little meadows. I'm raking. You sometimes rake to help dry the hay. It was so hot and dry this year that was not necessary. So basically I'm doubling up or occasionally tripling up the rows simply to cut down the amount of time that the baler needs to go around, because it can pick up a bigger windrow all at once. And so if I can put them together with the rake, then it takes a lot less time for Clay to bale. So here we're working together in one little field, and as I get done raking it, to try not to get too far ahead of him, I go over to the next field that you can see off there, kind of in the distant background, while he finishes up baling what is in this field. Really gets so excited about getting in the tractor. It's one of his very favorite things to do. If it's not too hot, he loves to ride on my feet in the tractor. He'd probably do it even when it was too hot. I just make him stay in the shade when I think it's too hot. Okay, babe, lay down. Lay down. Now lay the whole way down so I can get to the pedals. Good boy. So we do a lot of going around the field like this. And as I mentioned, these fields are not, don't have the soil turned over in any way, so they're somewhat bumpy and rough, and so riding around in the tractor is quite jostly experience. I did my best to hold the camera still, but it's going to give you a little bit of an idea of how rough the fields are. And it feels a little bit at the end of the day, if you've been in that tractor seat all day, like somebody beat you up. Anyhow, I mostly do the raking. The older tractor can power the rake just fine. It doesn't have quite the horsepower needed to run the swather and the baler, so Clay does those two, and I do this. And I usually have to get the edge raked first, so he's got one windrow to start on, and then as you'll see, he'll start baling right in behind me, and we'll both be working in this field at the same time. You can see when I look behind me how the tines on that rake, which are almost out of sight under the back of the tractor from where I could hold the camera while still driving, are picking up the windrow I'm driving on top of and flopping it all over on top of the one I'm driving beside, which is doubling it up and making a nice thick windrow. These smaller fields give you lots of tight curves and corners, so at times you have to spend a lot of time stopping, backing up, turning around, and getting all, reset again. If these were the big, huge, many acres in one field, square rectangular fields where you could just drive lines or loops forever, you wouldn't have all your time spent doing this. But this is small Wyoming mountain hay farming. A lot of these meadows and pastures are tucked in between the hills and the trees, so occasionally as you're driving around you will see something cool like this sight coming up. Last year I missed it with the camera. I nearly missed this little thing with the camera. Last year, a giant mountain lion walked down one of the windrows right after Clay had done a loop around the field. But this year I did manage to catch this little guy on camera for a second. These bales we're making are all small squares. They're rectangular shape, but the ends are square as opposed to round bales. And they weigh about 80 pounds a piece. So they're, able to be picked up by a person, not a piece of machinery. The big square ones or the big round ones can weigh anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 pounds. You're not moving them by yourself. But as we're doing the baling and raking, people who are buying hay or somebody they've hired to do the work for them is showing up with their trucks and trailers and driving around the field behind us and picking up and stacking and hauling all the bales off to various barns and sheds. Most of this is going to feed horses through the year. And that fellow over there in the distance is actually the mutual friend that very first introduced Clay and I to each other many, many years ago. So we appreciate that.
Cutting the string off just about so it's a natural tie, and then it don't get hung up in the baler. That don't look very good, but I can't do anything about that. It'll probably break when that goes off. And you move.
Why is there 2 different colors of string in here?
Well, this string is patented for the what do you call it? Weed and pest. To certify that it's certified weed-free hay. That would be it. And we do have a very high quality hay. People seem to want it.
So every time you get one roll empty, you put another roll in and tie them together so that you never actually run out while you're making a bale.
And it's not the end of the world. You could run out, but it would suck because then you got to restring it, and it takes...
It's approximately like rethreading a giant sewing machine.
Yeah. I mean, it had to be done originally, so it can be done. It's just, if you can avoid it, it's probably a better idea.
Baler even has a nifty little baler counter that tells you got 95 bales out of that one field. We usually reset it between fields so Clay can keep a record every year of what each one produces. So I'll let you in on a little secret. I hate haying season. I don't mind any of the actual work. I don't mind running the hay rake, actually doing the work. What I don't like is that good haying weather is weather I despise. I do not like being hot and dry. And in addition to that, I'm really, really allergic to grass and hay dust. I have been my whole life. It's not quite as severe as it used to be, but it makes this time of year quite difficult for me. And then there's just all the stresses that come with it. Should you start cutting? Is the weather forecast going to be right? You check 6 forecasts. Is it going to rain if I start laying hay down? Are we going to get it up dry? Is the equipment going to keep running? Are we going to be able to get a part for it if this or that thing breaks? Are the people who say they want it going to actually show up and pick it up? Or are we going to have to pick it all up? And there's just so many different stressors that go along with haying, and It stresses Clay out. That stresses me out because I don't like him being stressed out. Anyway, so between, you know, heat, allergies, and just like I said, the amount of physical labor isn't really what I mind, but it also takes over everything. It pushes everything else into the background. Anything that might need done in the garden or watered or cared for, anything kind of ends up in the background because we usually spend, you know, 10 days to 2 weeks, if we can go straight through, if there's no weather that, you know, creates a break in the middle, doing nothing but something to do with making hay. And so then when it wraps up, you're behind on everything else. So it's, you know, in one way I don't mind the work, but I very much do not enjoy all the stresses and allergies and everything else that comes along with haymaking season. Somebody had asked, I saw the other day, you know, have we ever considered moving to a more hospitable climate? I assume they meant somewhere warmer. When I was out there on the hay rake getting bitten by flies and mosquitoes and overheating and everything, I was thinking, yep, I sure have considered moving to somewhere more hospitable. The North Pole's looking really good, or maybe Antarctica. Anywhere grass doesn't grow and it never gets hot. Anyway, so that's my feelings about hay. I help Clay with it because it's something he does and he needs a second pair of hands, and I love him, but you couldn't pay me any amount of money that would make me do this for the income. One of the other things you have to do is check the moisture content in your hay. This can be done by hand, or it can be done by something fancy like this moisture meter tester. If it's too wet, your hay will mold and rot, or even possibly start to decompose in there enough to heat up and combust. I personally know more than one person who's had a barn burned down by hay that self-combusted. And if it's too dry, it gets really dusty and it's not good feed for the animals. So you want to make sure it's about the right moisture percentage.
See, you just grease enough so that it just barely starts to come out. You don't want to over grease it, because then you get grease, you know, in all the mechanisms. There is such a thing as too much grease, but there's also a thing not enough. And some of these are in tough places. Oh, there we got too much.
And then in addition to all the actual work to, you know, grow the grass, cut the hay, rake the hay, bale the hay, you always get this kind of thing. Oh, and maintain the equipment, you get this kind of thing that happens. Shear bolts that shear because of something, don't even know what the baler hit. These fields are pretty clean. And when that happens, you end up doing just this, restringing all the twine through there. And it's really hard to show how it works inside when it's running, but it does work. A baler works very much like a giant sewing machine. And so you end up doing a lot of mechanicking as well. And this year seemed to include more breakdowns than a lot of them have, to various pieces of equipment. Things just wear and tear over time, and then that's always stressful, because when you got hay on the ground, you want to get it up. You don't want to be spending your time wrenching on your equipment. And where we live in a fairly rural, remote area, most parts are a long ways away, and if you got hay on the ground, a part that's going to show up next week doesn't do you much good. So there was a few things that got rebuilt with the help of some neighboring ranchers and some cutting torches and welding torches just to get through the end of the year. But we did indeed get through the end of the year and got little over 50 tons of hay baled up, beautiful, perfect, as in, you know, dry. It did not get rained on. Nice and green, where it'll be rich and nutritious for all the horses that are going to eat that through the year. So that is our hay baling operation for the year, hay making operation for the year, and I'm really glad it's done.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Come back next time for more adventures.
Thanks for watching.